Good afternoon and welcome to the Hearsink School of Medicine Grand Rounds. Today we will be welcoming Anna Threadcraft, the Wellbeing Program Manager for Delta Airlines. Anna will present on a workplace well-being, principles for cultivating an environment that thrives. Anna comes to us today really as a citizen of Alabama and a former employee of UAB and a Blazer, as where she's also gained part of her education. She brings a wealth of knowledge to share, not only because she's been a part of us, but because of her career has really spanned the globe. Although Anna is an Alabama native, Anna began her career in Nova Scotia, Canada, as a clinical dietitian in the Queen Elizabeth II Hospital. She's been a college nutrition professor, sports dietitian, private practice nutrition counselor, in addition to sharing her expertise for several nationally recognized radio stations and television networks. Her diverse professional background includes international health education in Canada, Wales, Puerto Rico, Mexico, Haiti, Guatemala, Dubai, Egypt. And in these spaces, she's participated in UAB-led research projects to decrease the high death rate related to colorectal cancer. She became the first registered dietitian for Regions Bank, Alabama's only Fortune 500 company or Forbes 500 company, creating a wellness program to support their 24,000 employees located throughout 16 states. 4 years later, she became the Employee Wellness Director for UAB and now currently serves as the Delta Airlines Wellbeing Program Manager, supporting their global population for almost 90,000 employees. Anna strives to effectively educate and empower employees to take realistic and sustainable steps toward healthy living through an outcome-based, incentive-driven approach. Believing that health is much more than numbers on a scale, she endeavors to build a workplace culture that supports a person's emotional, social, financial, and physical well-being. I think we will all be really encouraged and blessed by Anna's presentation. I look forward to hearing more about her approach, as well as how that could help each of us here at UAB. Anna, I now welcome you to UAB and welcome you back and turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Vickers. That was such a warm welcome. I appreciate that. And thank you, everybody, for joining today. I really appreciate the time. And the invitation is especially special coming back, as Dr. Vickers said, to UAB. I was meeting with the prep team earlier this week, and I said, now, is this kind of one of your canned presentations? I said, oh, no, this one's special for UAB. And part of it is because I want to not only share about some of the neat things we're doing at Delta and how we're working through the recovery season post-COVID, but I want to encourage you guys, knowing, having been part of that culture, it is still tough and it's hard. I want to leave you with some things to encourage you and give you some practical principles to think through, but also even as a workplace, what can we do and you guys apply to make it an environment that thrives. So let me share my screen quickly with you guys, and then we will get right into it. All right, good to go. All right, let's get started. So thank you again. I appreciate your time. And as Dr. Vickers mentioned, I've been with Delta Airlines now for almost 3 years. I actually moved up to Atlanta from UAB, and it was December 16th was my start day, and everything seemed like glitter was on top of it. And then 2 months later, we shifted into the pandemic season. But what I'll say is, and I'll talk a little more about that because that's a big part of our well-being culture and what's impacted that. But through that season, I watched our leadership walk through things that were difficult and saw a lot of the heart of the company that made me come to trust not just the brand, but really the culture in the workplace as well. Delta is a global airline. A lot of you have probably flown Delta before, and if you haven't, you will. It is a fantastic group, but not just in the way that they serve the customers, but what happens behind the scenes too with the employees. And what's neat about really any airline, but particularly Delta, is that they don't just get people from point A to point B, but they really have that Publix mentality that if you're going to travel somewhere, why don't we make it a pleasure? So people want to come back and tell their friends about it. And that even if we don't do it right, we do the best we can to make it right and to address that. Because just like any company, Delta doesn't always do it perfect. But what I've seen is their genuine attempt to make sure things are made right when something goes wrong. And for me too, it's been really interesting to see a global company and how they function with 90,000 employees in different time zones, a 24/7 operation, different languages, different eligibilities for health plans. How do we run that well and still infuse care into the workplace? And specifically with my team and our role, how do we make sure employees feel that they're supported to be their healthiest, both in and outside of the workplace? And it takes some creativity to do that, but I think it also takes a few other factors that we'll jump into in a little bit. And for the time that we've got together, we've got about 35, 40 minutes or so. I want to touch base on a few things. So we'll go through the culture at Delta, talk a little bit about what that means to be a global airline. We're going to talk about some of the barriers that we faced as an organization, not just our domestic, but international as well. And some things you might see actually that are some similarities to UAB as we've kind of processed through the past few years. Want to talk a little bit about the pillars of well-being and where we came to as deciding what are the things that really make up our well-being program that look at health as a holistic approach. A lot of people do think about numbers on the scale when it comes to health, or they think about the absence of disease, and that means health. But what I've learned and what I'm seeing that our employees are responding to is that when you approach wellness as a lifestyle, it is so much more intentional for people. And it also gives them the ability to start where they're ready to take that first step. So we'll dive into those 4 pillars and unpack those a little bit, and then end with a few things to talk about how do we personally, as a part of UAB, how do you enthuse into the workplace an environment that thrives? But even personally, I want to end with some things to think about and consider your personal life and your family and the communities that you go home to. What are some things that you can really resonate with that you can take as an action item well beyond this presentation? And to start off, just to tell you a little bit about myself, I did come from UAB, and still a lot of you on this call, actually, I keep in touch with. I consider you guys still close friends, some of you even like family as well. And when it came to going into the profession of health promotion, honestly, a lot of it initially was because I really loved food and I enjoyed eating. I thought, well, it sounds great to get paid for a job. You can do something that you love. And I've always loved eating. I came from a big family. Mealtime was really important. Had 2 big brothers, so they were playing sports a lot. And when I was old enough to play sports, the dinner table was a big time of connection for us. And my mom's a great cook, so it was always a connecting point, at least Monday through Friday for us, and oftentimes after church on Sundays too. But as I've gotten into the profession, I've realized that wellness and health promotion is so much more than just food. And I did move to Canada after college and started my career in a hospital system, very similar in a lot of ways to UAB, except it was socialized medicine. And I think it was there that I saw the impact of food and so much more beyond that around emotional well-being, physical health, the exercise, it all ties in together. I spent about 7 years in Halifax, Nova Scotia, taught at a university called Dalhousie, started to do some media, and about the 7-year mark, I got a little bit tired of shoveling snow. I missed my family, and I really missed Chick-fil-A. And a job opportunity came up with Regions Bank, and it just sounded like such an invitation to use what I'd learned in Canada, working with so many patients. And my clinic covered everything. So if a doctor or even a nurse or a social worker referred somebody for a nutrition issue, they came to my clinic. And the last couple of years, I was managing the outpatient clinic. So it's everything from cardiac to weight management to gastrointestinal. That's kind of where my passion for GI came from. I'll touch on that in a little bit. But it gave me an opportunity to not only really be specialized in the education that I give in the outpatient setting, but how to listen to people, because people are pretty similar. And I saw that when I came to Regions, even though these were tellers and bankers and finance related employees, they were still people that needed to move more, eat less, sleep more, and find ways to rest. So I came in really not knowing what I was going to do. And to be honest, with Regions, I look back and think there's no way I would have hired myself knowing what I know now. But thankfully, the bank took a risk and brought on a dietitian. And we created this well-being program for their employees that was focused on really the similar things that we focused on at UAB and at Delta, because the principles of health are consistent. And they really do stand the test of time. It's not about dieting. It's truly taking care of your body as a whole and making time to rest, eating food to fuel your body, and then moving. And it doesn't have to be at a gym. And I think we've gotten away from some of that. Sometimes our jobs are part of the problem, that we are sedentary a lot, but those are principles that can enthuse into that program with regions and enjoy that time with them. But then UAB made an invitation for me to come be the director of employee wellness. And it was an opportunity I couldn't refuse. And I think the diversity of the roles has been something that's been really special for me, because health, again, is very diverse. And as a dietitian, I could take those skills and really craft those to be expanded to reach a diverse audience. What I love about UAB is that the world has come there. There's over 100 nationalities represented at UAB. And now at Delta, we are out to the world. But the common thread is that we've got a lot of different cultures represented, a lot of different languages, different traditions, but health still matters no matter what for every one of those people, no matter their ethnicity, their financial status, all of those different factors. I also appreciate with this job that there's a lifelong application. And even when I prepare for these presentations, usually I'm up way too late the night before reviewing the notes and going through it and thinking, yeah, I'm gonna have to confess that I did not get the sleep I needed, even though that's one of the components I'll often talk about is rest. But it keeps me accountable, and it's something that I enjoy talking about because I know it matters. When we are our healthiest version, and we don't always hit everything 100%, but when we find enough balance that we're working on most of those components, we interact with people differently, we handle stress differently, and we can actually do our jobs a lot better too. So I feel like when I get to talk about this, it keeps me accountable as well as being able to share things with other people. But probably the best part about this job is that it's a helping profession. And I would venture to say everybody on this call that is part of why you went into what you do right now. Probably not for the money. A lot of us, I mean, money matters and it's important, but the real reward comes from the impact we make on the people that we serve and the patients we're taking care of. And regardless of what that role is, whether you're involved in the marketing for UAB medicine, or you're the clinician who made that discovery that's going to make that research really stand out worldwide for UAB, everything that you do has an impact and it makes a difference. And we'll touch on that through this presentation too, that we can overlook sometimes the smallest things that can have an impact that really are a contributor to a workplace that thrives. And with that helping profession, I think that's where a lot of gratification comes from and pushes us to get through some of those harder times as well. In my time at UAB, I was there for a little over 3 years, and some of the things that my team did with Riley Thornton, my partner in crime, we introduced WellScreen. So if you've ever gotten your biometric screening done, that was our team that brought that in person, because we realized everybody should know their numbers. But one of the barriers is getting to a place to get it done in the midst of lack of time. So we set up those clinics and spots around UAB medicine and on the campus area as well. The walking trails, if you've used any of those, we refaced those, did a ribbon cutting ceremony, and actually included a trail with Children's Hospital so that you could walk through Children's and through UAB medicine without ever leaving the building. That was a special time too, because we realized even the signage needed to be more specific so people could know where to go and have a place to get away for a quick stress break, to be able to connect and collaborate with coworkers and do a walking meeting rather than maybe a sitting meeting. But probably the most goofy thing that you may have known about my time at UAB, or if you don't, maybe now you'll know I was connected with it, had to do with the colon. So if you ever saw the inflatable colon, it's a 30-foot inflatable colon, and you walk through and you can see polyps and stage 1 cancer. And it has a lot of that McWane Center kind of feel to it. And initially people often think it's a bouncy castle. So it kind of brings over a crowd. And then initially they're like, what in the world is this? But it's one of the best education tools. And it really started with a conversation with UAB Medicine Marketing, American Cancer Society, and my team around the low screening rates for colorectal cancer. And the issue was that this is one of the most preventable cancers with early detection, but it's an awkward cancer. No one wants to talk about the procedure to get screened, much more do it themselves, even though a colonoscopy is about 15 minutes. And it impacts men and women equally. We know, we just don't like discussing it. So the goal of that meeting was, how can we, in a creative way, without being crude, bring emphasis to a really important procedure that we're not doing very well with, but we have provided through our insurance to get it done, whether that's a colonoscopy, FET test, FOBT, whatever it may be. And what it turned into was every year coming back with the Colon on the Corner campaign. We actually had the inflatable colon on the UAB green for the first time. We had it at TKC on the corner. We had it inside the atrium area. And I will never forget, y'all, it snowed the morning we were going to have it on the corner. And I can't remember what month it was, but it was not a month that was supposed to snow. So I got there about 5:15 a.m. Of course, it's the janitor and me. And I walk in, drag this huge thing that I'm going to have to unfold and then blow up. And the janitor's looking at me like, what in the world are you doing? Because he's going to think it's a bouncy castle. Well, then as it inflates, then he gives me the even more strange eyes, like, are you supposed to be here? As he sees this colon appear. And I held my badge up. I was like, it's just an inflatable colon. That did not suffice. He didn't ask any questions, but I think he figured this is someone else's problem and not his. But we tried to engage our employees. And what we found is that we also had a lot of our employees that saw this, that were impacted by it. And what was most special was at the very end of the 2 years of having this campaign, our screening rates went up almost 13%. So we know lives were changed, polyps were found. Hopefully cancer was detected early enough where it didn't expand to be a later stage of colorectal cancer. And we had leadership involved. You can see senior leaders wearing blue through the month of March to promote the campaign. James Spann showed up for one of our events. He's on the far left-hand corner. And maybe my favorite picture on this slide, the whole GI team was able to come out and join us for one of our events. And we try again to make it fun. We had Motown music and Dunkin' Donuts offered free coffee. Well, Dr. Kennedy is doing the soul train through the colon. And I think this was actually, we joke and call it the semicolon. It's only 10 feet instead of the 30. But we had a small promo during the month of March about 3 years ago. And it was a blast. And I do have video footage, but I figured it's safer to just share a picture of it. But kind of jumping back to Delta Airlines, it has become a renowned airline, and for a lot of good reasons too. They really focus on, again, not just the job of getting somewhere from point A to point B, but the experience of it. From checking in to when you deplane, making sure even now, if you use your cell phone and you've traveled in the past 2 or 3 years, you get text notifications. Your bag is now on carousel X. And that goes a long way, especially when we are busy. And I know everyone on this call is. That's one of our greatest barriers to quality of life, is that we're so stinking busy. We don't have time to take care of ourselves. But the little things, feeling like communication is clear and taking care of our customers, even before point A and point B, goes a long way. But also making sure that the culture for our employees is something that we prioritize, because we know if our employees feel cared for in the workplace and supported, that carries into their interaction with our customers. And it also means that they're going to be healthier to show up for work and do their job with excellence, and also take care of each other and their coworkers in the workplace as well. What's special about Delta, and particularly in the past 2 years, is what they've done to make strides to say, we're going to put our money where our mouth is. With COVID, our airline was hit really hard, very similar to UAB in terms of like something's just shut down. There was a lot of unknown, a lot of financial cost. We were burning millions of dollars daily in parking planes. And it was, I was newer to the airline, but with my coworkers I talked to who'd been with the company 30 and 40 years, they'd never experienced something like this. Way worse than 9/11. And 9/11 was tragic. And I think the part that was so difficult that I know UAB experienced too is we didn't know when it was going to get better. And yet we still had a job and responsibility and needed to push forward. But being able to do that without certainty is really difficult. But I think for the well-being team, it raised our visibility where people, and I mean every employee, was paying attention to their health. We needed to know where could we test, and Delta set up testing sites throughout our organization. We became a testing site in Atlanta for the public as well to come in, because we knew this is more than just our employees. This is our population, our neighbors, our communities. But we hired a chief health officer, and we're the first airline to do that. And not just for the frou-frou part of like, well, now we have a medical person, this looks good for our resume. This was a Mayo doctor, Dr. Henry Ting, that was a cardiologist that knows the value of research and knows that we have to have the meat behind what we do. It can't just be because it feels good and it's the right thing to do. We need to have the support behind it to show that we are in the game and we want to be game changers and make a difference. And while doing that, enthuse care and trust with our employees and the community as well. We've made a lot of initiatives with diversity, equity, inclusion, and some of that ties into wellness specifically because this raised a whole lot of awareness that we have employees, and we know this, we've got all different roles within the company, but we realize we have employees that go home to food deserts with incredible food insecurity. We had a lot of employees that we realized were homeless through the pandemic. Probably, I want to say 2 or 3 months after things really just came to a halt, the decision was made by leadership that in order not to furlough anybody, we were going to have a 25% pay cut for everyone. So I think that was announced on a Wednesday, and then that following paycheck, everyone saw 25% less in what came in. For some people, not a huge deal. They've been good budgeters and they plan ahead. For the majority of our company, that was a hit. And what it did was preserve our company and ensure that we didn't have to let anybody go until we could get through some of the unknown. But we saw that there were a lot of employees already just barely making it through. And even though we have an awesome 401k match program, that didn't hold any weight for somebody choosing between diapers and groceries and matching your 401k. And it wasn't about talking about our great match anymore. It was, we need to get you to our financial well-being coaches so you can get out of debt and learn to budget. So not only do you know how to buy the groceries and the diapers, but you can start planning ahead for the unexpected or for the things that you aren't paying attention to, but that you know come every year as a once a year expense. And when people are balanced financially, that impacts what they choose to eat, when they eat, their emotional well-being, the anxiety, stress, depression, et cetera. And we started to see that even what we did with that impact of a 25% salary cut still kept our team intact in the Delta family, but we had some responses we need to move quickly on to make sure we are caring for people who are impacted in a negative way from that too. And we've been able to recover in a lot of ways with our employees because our business is growing. Some operation is looking to be higher and heavier than it was in 2019, which that was a record year for us. But our employees haven't recovered yet. And so we're looking for ways to bring some, we call it surprise and delight moments, where we can show up on the ramps with our employees with popsicles and Powerade and say, hey, we appreciate you so much. And you think about, most of you, I think, are located in Birmingham right now or the surrounding area. It has been so hot this past week, and I feel hot and I'm in air conditioning. We have people in long sleeves and pants out on the ramp all day, loading bags, checking safety measures, all sorts of things. They're hot and tired. Or in the winter, they're in New York City at JFK, LaGuardia, or different places where it's freezing cold and planes still run. And so we still need people doing their job. So we're finding ways to meet them where they are for some surprise and delight opportunities, but also with our programming, how do we meet them where they are for childcare? How do we support them to have in the moment support when they're overwhelmed and need to talk to a mental health coach? I'll share some more details about our programs in a minute, what we've introduced, but these are some of the things that we've done to protect our people and our culture. And I brought this picture up at the beginning to show you. And one kind of fun fact about Delta, whenever we have pictures like this, these are real employees. And I think that also brings a little bit of ownership when we do any kind of promotional photography, because our employees feel like they matter. And I heard the term Delta family when I started, and I was like, I'm gonna learn the real behind the scenes when I get into the company and get in the weeds and see that that's not true. But the reality is there is a Delta family culture. And I mentioned how we had a pay cut that was about a year long, that everybody went 25% less. I heard that there's not just one, but multiple employees that pulled together to say, hey, we're willing, if you need it, we'll give more than 25%. We're in a good spot, and we want to make sure nobody gets let go. And that blew me away. And there are evidence of that in so many different capacities. But I think there is a real feel of Delta family. Again, every family has their crazy, and our company has things that aren't perfect. But I do think there is, from a top down, a real loyalty and a commitment to be in a workplace that is a family and works together. But it doesn't mean that we're absent of stress. And as I prepped for this presentation, and really even talking with the team earlier this week, I realized UAB and Delta have a lot of things in common. When you think about the workforce and the stressors, the roles, the responsibilities, there are a lot of equivalents for a position from UAB and Delta. And I think in a lot of ways, we have a lot of similarities with what we went through in the past couple of years. And there are a couple key points with that. And one would be, we were leaders. People looked to us to see, what are they going to do? Are they going to mask or not mask? When it comes to flights, was Delta going to hold the middle seat blocked for safety, or fill that seat with the rear end to make some money on that ticket? The no-fly list, that was probably one of the most controversial things that was in the media, was we released our no-fly list, encourage other people to share theirs for the safety of not just our employees, but our customers. We've got to stick to policy and procedure, but we need to stand by that. And we want people to know, like, we're tough enough and confident that we need to do what's right, even if it costs us financially or defames us for some reason, that we believe in what we're standing by. But I feel like UAB were leading the way in the decisions you made around testing and quarantine and masking, and it didn't come without cost. You guys continued to push through, and you were consistent and perseverant. And I believe everybody's still recovering from that, but we are coming out on the other side of it. And I think that's really incredible to see how sometimes the most difficult things we go through are the most character building. And I've said with friends before about personal things that have been tough, like, I never want to relearn that lesson, but I'm really thankful that I did. And I think even as an organization, both Delta and UAB have learned some incredible lessons that are going to make us better and stronger in the end. However, all of those things that are listed on here, I think, are part of what has allowed the Wellbeing team to see, all right, we knew that this was important to have our programs that work, but we know more than ever we're hearing from our employees about where the barriers are, what they're struggling with. And one of the questions that comes up a lot is, what is well-being? I've touched on it a lot through the presentation, and that it's not just one thing, but it is really holistic. And for Delta Wellbeing, we know that there's several components to it, but before we came up with our official logo and our statement and what our program was going to look like as we responded to the pandemic, we needed to do some research and really look at where things were in 2020 and 2021, because it was different compared to 2019 and before that. So we looked at social determinants of health. As I talked about, we started to realize we have a lot of people that if they can't access healthy food in the airport because they have a 15-minute break, and to get to a break room or to some of the healthy areas or restaurants that offer healthy food, they have to go through security, just like every passenger. Well, that can take 20 minutes on its own, and then your break's gone. So if we don't make healthy options available and accessible to employees, their whole workday is full of lots of barriers. We also realized too, a lot of our resources, we have a ton, people didn't know about them because they don't check email. And I love to talk about the differences of our divisions. We've got, of course, flight attendants and pilots are usually the most popular, well-known employees. We have tech ops, which is our technical operations division. They're the guys that are working on the planes, that are double checking safety logistics, that are making sure that they're doing routine checks for stuff. If you've ever been waiting and someone comes on the intercom and says, we've got a technical issue, there's going to be a delay for 45 minutes, look at that as a protection, because somebody from tech ops probably realized them in summon that something looks off, and they're coming to fix it so that whether it was that flight or 3 flights later, that plane doesn't go down in the air. And then we've got airport cargo services, ACS. I will tell you, when I got to Delta, every time they said ACS, I was like, American Cancer Society, because we partnered so closely at UAB with them. But I realized ACS is our largest division of the entire company. They are the folks that are loading the bags underneath. They're the ones that greet you when you check in, that are gate agents that will tell you when it's time to board, when you're getting on your plane. They're a huge part of our organization. But we know for a lot of them, they are going to do a lot better for communication with flyers in a break room or somebody standing up at a briefing each morning to talk about stuff. Where our flight attendants, they're checking that email. And if you get a text to them, they're going to read it. Tech ops, if they have a cell phone, it's a flip phone. This is our group of traditionally men 40 and older, and they want to be at the camp on the weekend. They're the ones that we've got to be in person to meet them and connect with them. So what we found from our research, whether through surveys, through interviews, we've brought on now this past year a whole team of PhD researchers to really get in to understand through surveys and interaction and conversations with employees, where do we still have gaps in care? We know physical and mental well-being is where we've got some issues we need to work on. We've got financial and social dynamics we want to support. And then even for people where they go home in their community or their commute to get into the office. I spent a lot of time in New York City over the past 3 months with some of our, it's a hub up there, but we've got several airports we work out of, and realizing most employees that work for Delta there ride the train in. They take the subway. So you've got all this time, but could we optimize that time with some kind of well-being offering to make it a joyful start to their day for emotional well-being, or have some kind of training and modules they want to be a part of that they can do once or twice a week on their commute because they've got time and they've got internet access. So we've got all these different pieces of information that led us to where we realized there are 4 components of health. And this is where we really built our program, is we realized that there is a physical pillar that's needed, a emotional pillar. We found emotional is a better received word than mental, with some of the stigma that's been around that word, particularly financial. I've talked about that, how we realized we need to raise up a strong financial program to support our employees. And then a new one we added this year was social. That's around the family dynamic, like for care for children. A lot of the issues that we found our employees were facing was childcare. They were being asked to work, but it was such a quick change from the week before that they didn't know who could care for their kids, or they're home working and their kids can't go back to school because someone tested positive. Some of this is probably really familiar for you guys too, with daycare closing down because of a kid that came in that was positive. Elder care, a lot of employees caring for older parents. And so that was something we realized we need to address. Can't fix it, but what if we could provide something that would support people to get a vetted person to care, and maybe even provide a little bit of a stipend to help with some of that too. One of my favorite stories around the financial well-being is, and I'll give you some background, as 2020 came to a close, we were starting to hear these stories of people struggling financially. Still, we're having a hard time before we even went into the 25% pay cut. So we partnered with John Hope Bryant with the organization that he started called Operation Hope. And they really work with people who never set a budget, have a very poor credit score, and don't even know where to start. And with these financial health coaches that could talk virtually, and then now we actually have them placed in our hubs in different places across the country, people can go talk to somebody confidentially, and it's considered HIPAA in our perspective. We don't know who these individuals are, but they can meet with these coaches privately. And we had one of our employees who not only got out of debt, raised her credit score, she bought a house, first person in her family to actually purchase a house. And she got to go with our financial well-being team about 3 weeks ago and ring the bell at Wall Street. And it's those kind of stories that we know her whole family was impacted by 1 or 2 or 3 sessions she had with a financial coach that said, let's start where you're ready to start. We're not going to get there tomorrow, but we'll take it one day at a time. And we know these 4 pillars all contribute to that journey mentality, that it's not a one-stop shop. It's a lot of things. And we've got to be honest with ourselves that we can't tackle them all at one time, but we need to start with what we can control. We have a lot of partners we work with, a lot of vendors. Hopefully, you know, this is way beyond my scope to be able to do all these things we're talking about. And there are a lot of people smarter than me that help us do what we do. And that's what I love, especially our well-being team. We have about 65 people now that are part of our team, and we had 8 about 2 years ago. So it has definitely come to be a whole different ballgame, especially with having Dr. Ting. That brought a lot of visibility and a lot of opportunity from a high level to bring in our researchers, to bring in our nurses, other MDs, lots of PhDs, and to really see from a well-rounded perspective, how do we make sure our village of people, 90,000 employees globally, feel supported to be well and healthy. This is a list of a lot of the vendors we work with for diabetes management, blood pressure, the things I talked about with like childcare, elder care, things like that. I will draw your attention to the far left row, the third one down. It looks like kind of a hippie 1960s picture of a male with an afro. That's all vegetables. And that is the logo for Natural Born Tillers. One really fun part, and if you get to come visit me in Atlanta, and I welcome all of you to make a visit, I'll take you out to our community gardens. And we have a group that manages the gardens called the Natural Born Tillers. They do garden tours. They do a harvest tour in the season when it's time to harvest different stuff. We grow hibiscus, eggplant, cucumbers, peppers, and we even have beehives. And this one just blows my mind when I found out we had beehives. We have someone else that manages those, but we don't eat the honey from the beehive, and we are working at getting some of that produce into our cafeteria at headquarters, but it provides a spot for people to get outside and go for a walk and to do something that is a de-stressor that's not connected to their phone. Walk out with a coworker and a colleague. And they're not big gardens and they're not fancy. And we don't pay that group a lot of money necessarily, but it's one of those extra ads that we try to have. And we want to replicate to other hubs and areas around the country to provide that little bit of a break from some of the workday stress. So just kind of give you a picture, there are a lot of partners that we work with that really strengthen our ability to reach employees and reach them in the way that they're ready to be reached. So when it comes to emotional well-being, one of the vendors we work with is the opportunity to, it's called Ginger, like the spice, and you can text a counselor 24/7. Within about 47 seconds, a mental health coach will respond. I have some wonderful friends and love them dearly. And if I text an SOS text, I'll hear back pretty soon, but I don't know it would be in 47 seconds. And as much as they give great advice, they're not a trained counselor. And what we found is that we do have a lot of employees, like I mentioned, that do not want to use a cell phone. They don't want to give you personal information. But we have a very strong amount of employees that actually do need to have some way, right when they get off a flight, an interaction with a tough customer, interaction with a tough employee, a colleague, and they're really frazzled and they've got to step up for another meeting or another interaction and they need to talk to somebody and reach out. They can text that mental health coach. And then if they wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning thinking about that same stressful interaction, they can still text again and someone can see the entire thread so they don't have to retell their story, and you'll get another response from a counselor within 47 seconds. So we've tried to really make sure that of those 4 pillars, we have different ways we're meeting the needs of people to meet them where they are with what makes sense for them and what they're ready for to make that change. We have a couple themes at Delta that I think have really directed how we introduce or how we continue to promote the pillars that we have. And one of those, as I've referenced several times, is that well-being and health is a journey. And for us, I want you even thinking about this, like most of us can identify the things we need to do right. We're pretty critical when it comes to what we need to improve. A lot of times we're not good about saying, you know what? I got to bed at 10:30 last night. That was a victory. I'm going to tell myself good job for that when most of the time it's been 1 a.m. because I'm catching up on work late at night. We need to stop and reflect on the things that are positive, but we also need to remember that it is a lifestyle process and not just a one-stop shop or a quick fix for anything. And through that journey, we need to make sure, especially from my team, what we implement, that we're doing it with care and that we show a support and that it's relevant to the people that we're serving. Again, we have different audiences within our different divisions and different speeds that people want to go at in terms of like information overload and how we reach them, whether it's in person. And as I told you, we had a team of about 8 people 2 years ago. So there was no way we could travel to all these places. But then thanks to the pandemic, people became a little more comfortable virtual, and that allowed us to expand a lot faster until we could start to really grow our team to be physically more present on site with people. And one of the changes now, we have 3 divisional managers that their whole job is owning 1 or 2 different divisions and getting to know that culture. They're the ears to the ground to know what are the stressors going on. We've got certain divisions that we know have more risk for suicide, other ones that are more risk for sleep deprivation. What are we doing to make sure they know about the resources that specifically target those things? So those divisional managers report to me, and they now help take care of our entire company. And they're coming back to me to say, hey, here's what I'm thinking about what we can do to make sure this gets out to these people. And I'm going to connect with these leaders so that we're consistent in our messaging, but we are framing it in a way that can be heard best by these people that need it the most. And then the second theme, and this has taken on a new definition for me than I ever thought before could understand it to be, and that's safety. Now, working in a clinical environment in Canada, and then even with regions, the safety of information around finances, whole new understanding. And at UAB, it kind of brought together the clinical and the corporate part and how safety around patient care, information protection. I mean, even the well screens, we went to incredible length to make sure everything was done above board with HIPAA, with the safety for the sanitation, everything we used with the team that we worked with, all sorts of different things to make sure that we protected that. But Delta, there's a whole month for safety where we celebrate it. And that's June. June 1st is corporate-wide, company-wide, I should say, Safety Day. And I went to the Atlanta airport, we call it Worldport, on Safety Day to be part of our Wellbeing event. They had a massive, like a circuit tent on, I think it was D12. If you've ever flown to Montgomery or Dothan or some of the smaller areas in Alabama, you flew out of the D terminal and they shut down one of the ramps, had a huge tent, food trucks, music, tables galore, and Wellbeing was represented there, and several of our vendors that we knew represented a service very specific to the employees that were allowed to attend that event that day. It's a whole day thing from 7 to 6 all day. And it was an event just for Safety Day to celebrate. And what we've seen is that safety is so much more than just the safety that's physical. It actually ties into safety of emotional and mental well-being and physical too. But we've come up with ways to really support our employees for that mental well-being, carrying over that safety from just like, checks and balances for plain safety, but over into leaders. Are you equipped to be able to talk to employees you know are struggling? Are you personally stopping to think, I don't feel like I'm myself lately. I'm just barely kind of pushing through each day. And I'm also not willing to talk to someone else, but maybe if someone asked me how I'm doing and they approached it the right way, I'd be open to discuss it. So we introduced something called Resilient Option. And if you haven't heard of Dr. Sood, he's fabulous. He's done an incredible job bringing this program to us. He's worldwide renowned about finding those ways to pause and really reflect on what the stress is you're under and how to transition that into an uplifting moment. We've implemented first aid, mental health first aid training. That is kind of just what you think. It's like CPR training for 4 hours, or if you do a full day class where you're learning, like, what are the warning signs for suicide, burnout. I know Dr. Rogers has done an incredible job with burnout in terms of understanding, what are the burnout rates and the signs, and as an organization, what can we do to prevent that for interns, for med students, for clinicians, for nurses. Sometimes it's changing the amount of clicks to get to a resource that can decrease the amount of burnout time. Even for nurses to get into a chart note, how long does it take to get there? That's one extra step that can be stressful. And if we change that, it can improve. And appreciate all that Nisha and Dr. Rogers have done to really work on ways to bring wellness to you guys and make it even more intentional and purposeful. We also have time to talk training, which is more leader specific to know how to have those conversations with people that are struggling. And then peer support champion program. That's been a really valuable asset. We have over 500 wellbeing champions. And I know that sounds like a ton, but we do have 90,000 employees. So it's small in comparison, but these champions are the ones that get the word out about our programs. And of those champions, you can sign up to be a financial champion as well, and or a peer support champion. And they really have an expertise in those resources that I've mentioned before, like Ginger, that can help you know where to go for help through EIP, through the Ginger program and things like that too. So it's really a holistic approach with even our employees supporting and promoting safety to other people. And even the theme this month is I've got your back. And we're really enthusing for our company. It's not just about you getting the sleep you need, doing the safety things you need to do for your job and your particular work area. It's looking out for your employee. If they walk out onto the ramp and you're like, hey, you forgot your helmet, you need to feel confident to say that, because if that person took 10 more steps, they're about to hit a part of the plane that comes down that would put them in the ER. So it's some of you guys on the call, you may be the doctors like, yeah, I've actually seen those patients that forgot to do that. So it's a community thing too, when it comes to safety as well. As we kind of come to a wrap, I know I've shared a lot about what Delta offers, where we are, kind of what we're dealing with our employees to be relevant, to be accessible. We've got great programs, but it won't matter if our employees don't use them. And I can say too, I know Riley Thornton has done a really good job with a lot of the programs with the health awards. My health awards is what you call it at UAB, to make sure those things seem relevant to you guys. You can be rewarded for healthy actions. And we need people like Riley and others that are really intentional to know what is the culture, because we can have great stuff, but if we don't get it out to people and in the way that they're going to respond, it won't bring value for them. And that's what we're working on at Delta as well, and knowing where people are and inviting them into change, not shaming them or guilting to that. But personally, there's some things I want to leave you with some principles to work by. We hear about, things to live by, but I want to wrap with some things that you can consider in your work environment. Personally, there are a lot of things that you can't control. And I'll use myself as an example. There are things that I know I cannot fix, but what is within my control? And that is my perspective on things. And I probably had more of a learning lesson around that these past 3 years than ever before, and realizing I already have a choice. I need to own that this is hard and certain things are tough, but what am I going to do in terms of how I frame that situation, that scenario? So I'll give you kind of a funny example. About 5 days ago, I noticed that my shower is getting a lot cooler. The next night, it was like polar ice cold. So of course, my pilot light is out on my water heater, and it's going to be a thing. I tried to get a friend to come over and restart it, and it wouldn't stay lit, etc. And so then, of course, in my mind, I see these dollar signs that this is going to cost a couple $1,000s, and would rather do anything other than pay for a water heater. And so by night 5 of like ice cold water, I was just frustrated. And I knew I had an appointment the next morning. Someone was coming over to replace it, knew how much it would cost, so I could accept that cost. But I remember later that night, after I thought about my cold shower, I was like, all right, Anna, how many people in the world don't even have access to running water? It's a pretty good amount of people. And even more, how many people not only don't have access to running water, but even if they do, is it drinkable? Can they wash clothes in it? Can they actually, use things that you've been using that water for all week long? And it was so humbling to step back and think one shift in perspective of, yes, this stinks and it's freezing. And if it hadn't been 100 degrees in Atlanta every day, I would have been even more cold in that shower when I came in from a run trying to clean up. But there are still things to be grateful for. And it was upon me to make that decision of my perspective. Choose your perspective. That is one thing you can control. And you may have to re-choose over and over and over through your day of how you're going to look at something, but it makes a difference. And there's research on this too, as you train your brain to look at the positive. And it's not pie in the sky mentality, because there are things that are hard, but we can't change those necessarily. What we can change and control is our perspective. And that's my challenge to you. Along with that, cultivating joy. Dr. Ting, I've referenced, our Chief Health Officer. He's smart and he is talented and brings a lot of experience to the table. One thing he uniquely brings that still makes me smile a bit is he keeps talking about joy and wanting to bring joy into the workplace. So much so that the sign on our office area where our team sits is called the Joy Lab. Most of us, quite frankly, roll our eyes a bit when we've just had a stressful meeting. They're like, all right, I'm going to be back to the Joy Lab in a minute. We're like, not so joyful right now. But I also know there are moments where I catch that sign and I think, I have a leader that's committed to trying to make something different and cultivate an environment that feels hopeful. And I appreciate that. Even if we don't feel joy all the time, cultivating joy, I think that makes a difference. And there are practical ways to do that. And my challenge to you is to think about what can you do to incorporate that into the way you interact with other people. Maybe you don't work on a team that you really get along with, and that's stressful, and it's going to be almost untrue for you to try to find kind things to say to people on your team to cultivate joy. Maybe that janitor that cleans those toilets faithfully every workday that you're in the office, you know their name. Have you taken a moment to say, I appreciate you so much. I have never once thought these bathrooms were unclean, and that's because I've never had to. You do such a good job. There are countless opportunities that you can show gratitude to someone. And maybe it is talking to a coworker to say, every time you pipe up in our meetings, you contribute something that really gets me thinking. I appreciate you being on these calls or being a part of this, or appreciate the way that when we're doing a procedure, you have everything ready to go. And I never worry about XYZ. Think about within your field of work and what you do. Are you grateful? And do you show that to people? Maybe you're not a note writer, or you're not somebody that's comfortable saying a lot verbally, but there are ways to show gratitude. Refilling the coffee pot, so there's not 1/8 of a cup left because you took the most of it. Someone else won't even know that you're the last one, but then they're stuck with having to remake the coffee. Little things like that. Find those ways to cultivate joy in your small circles of influence. And maybe it's things that no one's even going to know that you did it, but it's you contributing to creating that environment that's thriving. And then lastly, I always try to pause with like a good takeaway and close with something to challenge people with. And I thought through a lot of different things. I feel like it's a little bit cheesy sometimes when something ends with a meditation moment, but this is more of a practical application that I want you to really marinate in for a little bit. When it comes to cell phones, this dawned on me about a year ago. My dad and I took a trip. One of the perks is family can fly with you when you get your travel privileges. And so my dad and I went out west to Utah, and we went to a couple of national parks together. We got on the plane and we were flying back, and Dad goes, oh no, oh my goodness. And I said, what's wrong? He's like, my cell phone, that battery's really low. And I said, well, what's your level right now? And he said, 87%. And I was like, what's the problem here? 87. I mean, the light had not even changed the battery to be red. Like that's 20% or less. But he was distraught. And so, and then he was like, and we're going to have this 4-hour flight and I can't charge it. And I was like, Dad, we're Delta. We have a USB port right there. Let me show you. Pulled out my extra cord. But I got to thinking about it. What do we do to make sure we never get low batteries? We probably all have at least 5 cords all over our houses. We've got one in the car, one in our office, one that's going to be at home, probably one by our bed to charge it at night, because if that phone's not by our bed, we're not going to get up because it's probably our alarm too. My phone, I'd rather have my car stolen than my cell phone. It has so much information and things that I use every single day that I don't want to lose it. But I then therefore watch my battery through the day. I probably look at least 3 times to see, ooh, do I need to charge it? And we've also got external chargers. So if we don't have access to a cord or to a place to plug in, we have something we can take with us if we're outdoors or somewhere that we don't have an electrical outlet for it. We put so much effort into preserving the battery of our phone, and we also pay attention to it so that we don't get even below 20%, heaven forbid. But how much time do we take care to look at our own battery, our personal energy level? I do not do myself justice if I compare it, especially to my cell phone, how much I care for that. And that's what I want you to think about. And hopefully next time you pick your phone up, when you're plugging it in, unplugging it, or even just looking at it, stop and think, have I done something to really care for myself today? Or am I planning within even this week to do something to recharge my battery? It may be as simple as taking 5 minutes to go sit somewhere where you're not around people, not with your phone, to eat in silence and stare at the wall because you've been so stimulated all day with stressful situations, conversations, patient loads, all sorts of stuff. But are you taking time for you? Maybe it's giving yourself the gift of 15 extra minutes of sleep, not snoozing the next morning, but going to bed earlier the night before, or getting out for a walk. A lot of us too, I feel like a lot of healthcare professionals are super competitive and we used to be really active and then life happened. And we think, well, if I can't run 6 miles, what's the point? Even a 10-minute walk is better than nothing. And I found even yesterday, I went out for a run again, so hot. And I was like, I'm just going to walk. I'm just going to move my body. And I ended up running some of it. And then I walked to the very end. But that is okay to break it down even to smaller wins and ways to take care of yourself to recharge that battery. And that's really the last challenge I want to give you guys, is thinking through ways you can take care of yourself and recharge. I am so grateful I had the chance to really talk about Delta Airlines and speak with you today. And I'm going to open up for some questions. I know we have a little bit of time left, Dr. Vickers, or I'm not sure if we have a moderator for questions, but I'd love to take questions that you have.
Hey, Anna, I'll be happy to ask you some questions. We've gotten several in. You talked about joy in your presentation. Is that something Delta is measuring? And if so, how are they measuring it?
That's an excellent question. So we are actually, and let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen so you don't see the background of that. All right. It's an interesting thing to measure. And so I'd love to share more information. But what I can tell you right now is that we just introduced something called the Flourishing Index. And this is from one of our new PhDs we just brought on, named Milay Shah, who's excellent. I think he's actually worked on some research with a couple of UAB physicians as well. But we're looking at components that cultivate joy. So feeling of belonging in the workplace, overall quality of life, a couple different factors. And it's 10 questions, pretty short, but that survey has closed and we're looking at now analyzing the data to see what are levels of joy for people in the workplace, and then how do we respond to that accordingly.
Wonderful. As health professionals, we can easily overlook our own well-being. In a role like yours, where well-being is what you promote and you teach it every day, what's one habit you try to implement to balance your own well-being?
That's a great question. Typically, I would say it's physical activity. I just finished my master's program with UAB in May, and the one thing I feel like the last year that tanked was having the time I like to have to really get out and go get exercise in. Where I live in Atlanta, we have the Beltline, and so it's a real safe, easy way to get some exercise in. And I saw that go down a lot. But I think something that I do for me is giving myself time in the morning intentionally to get up and to read and have some time to even pray before the day starts. And even if it's 15 minutes, just taking that time to have quiet time before I start my day, because it's usually something that I can't fit in at the end of the day, or I don't give the time I need. But for me, that's something that I know is for my mental and emotional well-being, but it impacts the rest of my day. And then quite frankly, like TikTok, I love the puppy videos and the animal stuff. I get lost on that. That is a weakness, because then I'm not getting the sleep that I need at night. But I do try to be really careful what I watch, and put myself in front of things that make me laugh, that are silly and not controversial. We have enough drama in real life. So even the movies I watch, if I'm with people that want to watch something stressful, I'm like, I can't watch. If you watch, I'll come back when it's over. But those are a couple things.
You mentioned a few programs related to mental health and EAP, specifically at Delta. Can you tell us a bit more about those programs, maybe why there's more than one?
Yeah, absolutely. I touched on it a little bit, but we have such a diverse population of people that we know we've got to have options for where they are not only ready to start, but that they're more comfortable with that. So talked about Ginger, the text to counselor 24/7. Resources for Living is a 1-800 number, and you call, they can help set you up with a counselor. Delta has just been so generous. We used to offer 7 sessions per issue per year. Now we've upped it to 12 sessions per issue per year. So if you need 12 sessions for a work-related issue, you've got that. They'll coordinate those. But then you get to the 12, and you know what? Home life's been rough. You can have 12 more sessions related to an issue from home. So you can do that virtually. You can do it on the phone, or they can schedule it for on-site with the counselor in the office. We've also put mental health coaches around our hubs, because we know a lot of people, they ride the train like we talked about back home, and to even get to a counseling session outside of work hours is not possible. So at some of our bigger hubs, we have people on site, regular work hours, so that you can pop in or schedule a session with them too.
Okay. I think we've got time for one more question, but I'll make it a different fun style question to end on that we got. What is your favorite place you traveled since working with Delta?
Such a good question. I've enjoyed the trips with my dad. That's been fun. Now some father-daughter time. We did get to go to Scotland, and just the heads up, like, employees don't pay to travel, but you're never guaranteed a seat. If a customer buys a seat, you're out. And I was on a plane one time, buckled, the door had not closed yet, and a flight attendant came and said, "I'm so sorry, someone just got put on this flight and you're gonna have to get off." And I was like, the walk of shame all the way off the plane to Birmingham from Atlanta, of all places. But last fall I looked, or no, actually Easter this year, on Tuesday night of Easter week, I looked on our website to see what the flight load looked like, and Spain had lots of open seats and lots of first class open seats. And I ended up going for a long weekend, flying Thursday night, coming back late Saturday. And they'll bump you up as far as the seats available if you're an employee, and there's no cost. And I got to fly first class to Spain, to Madrid, for 24 hours. And that was a moment I was like, I feel the Delta glitter right now. This is really fun.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's all the questions we've got time for. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Vickers for some closing remarks.
Anna, thank you so much. A really powerful presentation, and it's so exciting that UAB has been a part of your journey, and we take both pride and a little bit of credit for what you're doing for Delta. I would say the ideas around wellness are not lost on us, and we're trying to do as much as possible. We were one of the first to actually have a chief wellness officer, Dr. David Rogers. Dr. Watts has led efforts to put together a suicide prevention team. We have counseling sessions available for people, and we have a wellness app, Be Well. So we are trying to make sure we are fully attuned and attentive to the struggles and stress that our employees are experiencing as caregivers and as citizens of the stressful world we live in today. But you were a breath of fresh air, great insights, and we wish you well continued at Delta, and thank you for coming back to share with us.
Thank you for having me. Definitely a pleasure.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Take care.